So today's conversation is going to be so jam-packed with takeaways that I almost want to hold my nose, close my eyes, and jump straight in as if it's a deep end of wonderfulness. Because today I'm joined by Viv Groskop. Viv, you're amazing. You are...
Oh, let's just stop. Let's just stop there.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Right.
Bye. Yeah, I'm amazing.
I totally thought, there's a tech problem. Oh, okay.
No, we'll just stop on I'm amazing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's the shortest conversation I've ever had, but I think the most powerful.
Do go on, though. Do go on.
What I genuinely love about you is you get it. You understand that confidence and operating at a level of high status is something that, you have spoken about for over a decade now, but you understand the nuances of how that can look. And that's why I'm so excited about our conversation today, because everything that I've done with This Girl's on Fire has been about finding your own way. It doesn't matter. There was a bit in the book where it said, in your book, which is this one right here, which we're going to be talking about, yes, we talk about women who smash through glass ceilings and do amazing things. But actually, for you, your boldest move might be asking someone out for a coffee. And I was like, drop the mic. That's what it's all about. Confidence that meets you where you are. And so let's jump straight in. Your book is called Happy High Status. And there's so much else that you do around Happy High Status, but we'll focus on the book. So for those who don't know what it is, what is Happy High Status and what's the whole point of it?
Happy High Status is an expression that comes from theatre and comedy. It's used in the world of improv. So in improv comedy, I moved from journalism to stand-up comedy just over 10 years ago. And that's when I first started hearing about these ideas and was thinking, what status? Happy high status, what? And they ended up being the ideas that really helped me to feel more relaxed about myself in really pressured situations. And over the years, I really wanted to find a way of explaining this to other people to show that this is not just something you can use for performance. It's something you can use in any part of your life. So happy high status, the easiest way to describe it is the opposite of petty. So whatever you're like when you're at your most petty, when everything is like irritating you for no reason, that is the opposite of happy high status. So happy high status is when you're not necessarily high status. So you could be in a really bad place in your life, or you could be in a supposedly inferior position in your job, or it's not about being high status. It's not about being the queen or the CEO, right? That's social status. High status in the sense of performance, where these ideas originally came from, is you feel good in yourself. Like you feel like you're enough. You're not better than anyone else, but you're not worse than anyone else. That's having a good status. And the word happy high status adds into it not the idea that you're happy all of the time, but that you are satisfied with where you are in terms of yourself. You may not be satisfied in terms of where you are in life, because we can't all have great things happening for us all of the time. But happy high status is a way of moving through the world that is neutral, magnanimous, generous, it gives other people the benefit of the doubt. It means you don't need to dominate every conversation. If you're called upon to lead, you could lead if you had to. If you're called upon to follow, you can follow if you have to. It's a very open, generous kind of energy. The place where I first started to sort of notice it and use it the most was when I was being an MC in comedy. So that's the person who comes on between the acts and introduces the next person. And I had to sort of reset the room in those moments and be the friend of the audience, not take control and sort of be like Joan Rivers, but equally not be too on the back foot and a bit unsure of myself, but just being in that sort of medium, middle energy. And I began to realize the more I did that, the more I could learn how to take that feeling and that experience into other situations. So, of course, yeah, it comes from theatre performance comedy, but it's not about turning everybody, I was going to say into Judi Dench, but Judi Dench is actually a brilliant example of someone who is happy high status, who doesn't push herself forward. But it's not about becoming somebody brash and taking charge of everything. You could be like that if that's what your natural personality is. But for some people, happy high status will be about being quiet. It will be about listening. It will be about having authority and power maybe outside of a room instead of being the noisiest person in a meeting. So it looks different on different people, but when it's happening to you, you know it. Like the more you think about it and the more moments that you identify of, oh yeah, this is my happy high status, the more you'll be able to use it in moments where it perhaps doesn't come so naturally to you. So natural moments would be how you feel when you're at ease with people that you really like and trust, how you feel when you're performing a role in your job or in your life where you know that you're capable. And it's taking those moments and trying to import something of the feeling of capability in those moments into the moments where you don't feel so confident about yourself. And not trying to pretend, oh, just because you're, I don't know. I think I was pretty good at changing nappies when I used to imagine myself as like a perfect nappy changer. It's like, say you feel happy high status when you just, when you do up a nappy and you know that you've really nailed it. You can take that moment. You don't take that moment and think, yes, I'm going to take my nappy changing energy and be the CEO of the company. It's not about being delusional, but it's just about having enough of a sense of humor and a lightness about yourself to recognize that you're not really incapable in any situation. And you can use your moments of capability to influence the moments when you don't feel so in control. I feel like I've been boastful about my nappy changing skills now. They're a bit rusty. My kids are grown up.
No. I mean, I must admit, when you said it, I thought, it's been a long time.
It's been a long time for me.
Isn't it funny? The brain clicked in and I could smell that baby smell. And I don't mean the pooey smell. I just mean that lovely baby smell. I thought, oh, gosh, it's been my kids are nearly 17, nearly 22. So it's been a really long time since I've done anything like that. But instantly the brain went, oh, and I could visualize it. And I knew exactly what you meant, that moment where you're like, yeah, Poonami, that's not happening with this nappy.
Yeah, that's not happening today. Yeah.
There were so many little bits that I was smiling at while you were talking, because you are absolutely, you totally talk my language and I understand everything that you mean, because you can be so self-possessed, if you like, in terms of just having your own confidence, but still be nerdy, weird, geeky, clumsy, a little bit all over the place, and be totally chilled about yourself. And no, like you say, you don't have to command the room, but you know that if you needed to, you could. But you don't, because you're not necessarily needed at that moment, but you're chilled with it. To me, it's such a grounding feeling, is just that self-belief. And I can remember feeling like that as a child. It's not like something that you have to wait as you grow up to grow into it. You look at children. So many children are born with a happy high status because they are so chilled with who they are. It's until life comes along and you get the kind of bumps and bruises and someone points at you and go, you're a bit weird, and why is your hair a bit funny, and all those kind of things. And it's almost like if we could hold on to that through adulthood, we'd save ourselves so much pain. But now we have your book and we have your lovely learning, so we can revert back to. So I want to pick up on some of the different types of happy high status that you refer to, and the first one is vulnerable high status. There's a lot of talk in the ether at the moment about the power of vulnerability, which is true. There is a power in vulnerability, but sometimes, occasionally, particularly on social media, particularly around, certain so-called awareness days or what have you, everybody's out there pouring out their vulnerabilities in a kind of showy offy way. And I have to admit, I sit back and think, you're not being vulnerable. You're kind of showing off about things that you think haven't quite worked out for you in a hope that people will think you're vulnerable. But I see you and you're not. So how do you show your authentic vulnerable self while still maintaining high status without that kind of tipping over, if that makes sense?
I think for me, it's more about recognizing your vulnerability for yourself and not assuming that it's a handicap of any kind. You don't necessarily then have to share that with anyone else. And you're absolutely right, Andrea. You should always judge, like, why am I sharing this? Am I sharing this for the benefit of others? Is it a safe place for me to be vulnerable? There are not that still, we might talk about this. And you often notice that the people who are talking about it the most, well, they would be people like us who we're both broadcasters. We don't have anything to lose by being vulnerable. Most people, if you walk into a work meeting and start talking about difficult moments in your life, well, you might make some people feel awkward who don't feel that that's the right place for that conversation. And you might give other people information that they can then use against you. So it's often interesting for me to look at the people who have the luxury of being vulnerable and acknowledge that we don't all have that luxury of being openly vulnerable. And so for me, the most useful thing that you can say to everyone is to challenge this idea that inner vulnerability is a weakness. And it's not. So if you can sort of smile to yourself, knowing that you are a bit vulnerable about that thing or a bit insecure, and share it with people that you trust, it can be very powerful in public speaking when you're the person in charge and you can share a moment of vulnerability. But you want to mix it up with other things too, so that it's not only about that. For me, the most powerful thing about this idea of vulnerability, which I think is definitely growing and it's in the mainstream now, and I think it's a great thing, is that it challenges our stereotype of confidence, because we always think, oh, if you're confident, then you don't have any vulnerabilities. You're not insecure at all. You've just got it. You don't worry about anything. And I know from, my early experiences in comedy and meeting so many performers, no one is more vulnerable and insecure than performers. And everybody really secretly knows this, but we pretend to be in awe of their amazing confidence. Well, we know the truth. And I did a podcast for Happy High Status recently when the book came out, interviewing lots of people about their thoughts on this topic. And the comedian Tom Allen, people will know him from Bake Off, Extra Slice, can't say it, and The Apprentice. He calls it being confidently insecure. And to me, that is what really great confidence is, what really great vulnerability is mixing up those two things so that you're confident enough to not be afraid of showing your insecurities, but at the same time, you've mixed in some confidence too, to stop yourself from being too vulnerable. So think to yourself, what does it look like to be confidently insecure? And is it safe for me to express that in the situations where I want to express it? And how can I get used to being like that more often? Because it's such an easy way to be. If you don't have to pretend, you never have to pretend. You're just being confidently insecure.
There's such a release as well to not pretending anymore. I remember when I started my broadcasting career in the 90s, and the world was very different then. There was no social media, and also I was working on breakfast television at a time when there were only 4 channels. So we were averaging, across a week, there's 15 million viewers. So it was huge. It was it was a huge thing to be a broadcaster in those days on a terrestrial TV show. And for me, I was always me. when I was doing obviously I started doing the weather, and then when I was doing my features reporting, I became the sort of go-to features reporter in terms of, I've made it really clear, I don't do news. I'm not a news reporter, but I'm really good at helping shy people come out of their shell because I get it. And so I was always very me. The minute I started working on the sofa, the hallowed sofa, I felt this pressure of immaculate hair, immaculate jacket, only presenting this sort of way of being that a presenter was supposed to be. There's like this cookie cutter idea. And then moving across to Loose Women, that was quite a jolt in itself. But then once I realized, I could just be myself. Actually, it's all good. And I can say, no, I'm a bit rubbish at this, or I feel a bit shy about this, or I feel a bit awkward, or what have you. Oh, the relief of not having to. I mean, clearly you pretend a little bit because everybody pretends when they're at work. It doesn't matter whether you're working behind a till in a supermarket. You're putting your work face on, but the core of you is still the same. And so I know exactly what you mean. There's less pressure when you kind of hold your hands up and go, this is who I am. This is how I am. I'm amazing at being like this. And I'm all right with that. I can't do what you do, and I'm not like how you are. I'm all right with that. And to sort of move that forward, I just wanted to ask you as well, when you've been doing your podcast and speaking to various different people and the different roles they have, some are celebrities, some not. What has the resistance been to someone who is really comfortable in their own skin when they are happy high status, regardless as to what category? Because I know from my experience, not everybody likes it. So what have you found that the people that you've spoken to, what has been their best sort of response to other people feeling a bit bristly with their inner confidence and self-belief?
I think some of the people who have really made peace with themselves and with their self-belief are people who've learnt to tolerate the judgment of others. I don't want to say, I was deliberately not saying to ignore the judgment of others. I think we can never quite ignore it. We can certainly find a way of holding it at bay or of not making it the most important thing in our lives. On the podcast, How to Own the Room, which has been going for 5 years, we've had everybody from Hillary Clinton, Margaret Atwood, Professor Mary Beard, right through to people you would never have heard of. Like we had this amazing 70-year-old retired French teacher who joined Extinction Rebellion and has been arrested more than 10 times and has had to represent herself in court and tell the judge, this is why I do this thing. And she's a very shy, mild-mannered person who never imagined herself doing this. So the conversation is very much about finding your voice and your confidence in moments when you are being scrutinized and judged by others. And I always remember this phrase that Hillary Clinton used in that interview. She says, people will take their cues from you. In every situation, people will take their cues from you. So if you act as if something is normal and natural and you feel okay and comfortable with it, most of the time, most of the people, not all of the people, because as my dad used to always say to me, you can never please all of the people all of the time. You can only please some of the people some of the time. But most of the time, people will take their cues from you. So in most social situations, people are looking, the way that you walk into a room, that's the way that people are going to treat you. So if you walk in like, don't notice me, I'm nothing here, which sometimes is very, very useful and powerful, and that might be vulnerable, happy high status. You're just going to go back to the back of the room and listen. Well, people will take their cues from you and see that that's what your role is today. If you walk in very confident and ready to take a leading role in this conversation, or you sit forward in a meeting, or push your pen and piece of paper to one side, like I'm not going to be the one taking notes, I'm active here, I'm listening, then they will take their cues from you. So always remembering that you have that control. But yeah, like I say, I think that finding some way to make peace with the idea that everybody has an opinion about everything, and that doesn't mean you have to listen to any of them, is incredibly useful. And it's such a big part of our lives now as well. It doesn't really matter what sort of person you are, you're going to come across this noise. And whether it's about you or not, it doesn't really matter. We're so conscious now of the noise going on around us, that, you know, I know people who are afraid to go on social media or post things even that only their friends are going to see because they feel somehow judged. Well, why? You know, if you think it's something that makes you feel happy and you want to share it with people, then great. This is something that the writer Sylvia Plath calls the court of your own conscience. The court of your own conscience is something that we don't talk about and we don't develop enough. And it's the idea that it's the judge in your head that matters the most. You know, make your conscience clear, make your judge a friendly, generous one. And if the court of your own conscience has judged that your actions are good enough and that your intentions are good, then that's good enough. And if someone else doesn't like it, it's their problem.
What I love about that, about what you've just said, is that I know you ended it with, and if someone doesn't like that, someone else doesn't like that, that's their problem. So often we see that twisted round in that, well, I'm gonna tell you what I think about this, and if you don't like it, that's your problem. Because you don't mean it that way. You mean it from a place of really gentle strength, which is, this is just this has been my experience, or this is what I want to share with you today. And if you don't like it, I'm all right with that.
Oh yeah, I'm more than all right with it.
Strength in that.
Yeah, I did an event last week at a book festival talking about these ideas, and there's a particular idea I talk about in the book about how prevalent, especially in British culture, is the idea of knowing your place. So don't sit in a seat that's not intended for you. I mean, this idea is becoming quite old-fashioned now, and I think a new generation resists some of those ideas. But I hope I'm not so old that I'm the only person who remembers this. But you remember that sketch with John Cleese, where he says he looks down to me and I look up to him, and he looks down to me, and it's a very funny illustration of what we used to think in the old-fashioned sense of social status, of know your place, know your class. And my grandmother used to always talk about this. She ran a shop through the 50s, 60s, 70s, a corner shop, grocer store. And me and my grandmother and my granddad really got into playing golf. And they loved golf. I hate golf as a result. But anyway, that's another story. But at the golf club, they would say, don't talk to the Groskops. They own a shop, their trade. Know your place, right? So I'm very interested in this idea, and that we need to move beyond it and not judge people according to some perceived weird station in life. It's so toxic. And I was talking about this at a book festival, and in the questions, a man put his hand up and he basically said, I think people do need to know their place. That is the reality of life. And we had a bit of a back and forth about it, and we profoundly disagreed. And the rest of the audience became quite hostile towards him. And I found myself defending him and saying, no, he has a different point of view to me, but he's entitled to it. His point of view being different to mine doesn't affect me. I'm interested to know more about his point of view because it will strengthen mine. It doesn't mean I need to change his mind. It doesn't mean I need to hate him because he disrespects or disagrees with me. I don't mind. And I think we have lost that openness in our culture to accept all different points of view and listen to them and use an opposite point of view or an opposite judgment on you to strengthen yours. And it can all coexist. It doesn't have to go anywhere.
I could not agree more. And I remember, obviously, you know, I ended up working on Loose Women for 13 years, and every day you'd go into work and the morning meeting is there's 4 people with 4 different viewpoints. And I get frustrated sometimes that Lucimin isn't given the credit that it's due in terms of there are no other programs that I'm aware of where one, four strong female leads and four different opposing views. And yes, you can absolutely be polarized in terms of where you're coming from with your opinion. But the curiosity and the openness to listen to somebody else and not just listen waiting I mean, okay, clearly this does happen, but clearly to be able to listen to someone who's having a viewpoint that every part of your being is disagreeing with, but be really open and curious as to, I'm fascinated how you came to that. What were your experiences that led you to come to that conclusion? Because my experiences are so different. Isn't that interesting? Now, I agree with you that the world is now in a place whether you're either for me or against me. It doesn't have to be that way. There's billions of us on the planet. How can you possibly expect us all to feel exactly the same way about everything? Because we're all having our unique human experience. So to listen to someone who has a totally opposite point of view with an openness and a curiosity, and then just go, do you know what? I still don't agree with you, but it's all good. Thanks for sharing. Was always my viewpoint. And I used to get so much hate for that. Why did you not slam her down? Why did you not, you just listened. I saw you nod at one point. Like, it's insane. It's insane. And that way disaster lies, I think. If you can't find just a little piece of you that can find just even a bridge across it. I don't have to meet you on that bridge. I don't have to come over onto your side, and I'm not expecting you to come onto mine. But at least if I can have a better level of understanding, actually, the next time I have this conversation, I'm bringing with me everything that I learned from you. And it may have actually reinforced what I feel, or it may have tempered it slightly. Surely that's a more, I don't know, more rounded way to walk through life, because otherwise you'll be very cross all the time, and life's too short. Now, I want to ask you now about the idea of dominant happy high status, because clearly the man that stood up in a room full of people who were opposed to what he had to say would you put him in a level of a dominant high status, or was he not high status at all? Was he just really confident in his views and wanted to push them forward?
In that particular example, it was the kind of moment where somebody feels that their worldview is being questioned and they want to defend it. And that's not necessarily very happy high status. So he was coming from a defensive position and he moved into an attack. And that's something that we all have a tendency to do. But for me, true confidence is about being more confidently insecure and thinking, well, maybe there is something about my worldview that isn't quite right and I could listen to some other views on it. Or maybe this is just a separate idea and we can both coexist. Like the situation you describe, it's very refreshing, that multiple viewpoints can be listened to. And for me, it is reality. In reality, nothing is about winning and coming out best. I mean, that might work on one social media post or one news clip or TV clip. Somebody will win that interaction. But in real life, nobody wins. We all have to coexist. We can't just make everyone else go away that we don't agree with. And we have to find a middle ground. So being able to listen and accept that, yeah, that's okay. Not every, somebody said to me yesterday, I don't like that you say happy high status. I wish that you'd called it being happy with being mediocre. And I was like, yeah, I really like that idea. Maybe I will stop calling it happy high status. But I think for such a long time, we've lived with this idea that you need to have an edge on other people. You need to be confident in the very kind of stereotypical, no one can touch me kind of sense. And I think now people are realizing that is actually quite hollow and it's very restrictive. It's very hard, like you were describing that cookie cutter idea of got to have my suit, got to have my shoulder pads, got to have my blow dry. Well, I think we've really moved beyond all of that now, and we're recognizing that there's a strength in being more individual, in taking more risks, and in not trying to conform to a stereotype, because so many women as well will have realized that you can do all of those things and they'll still hate on you. So this kind of brittle, pseudo fake confidence is no protection for anything anyway. So you might as well be yourself.
What then for you is the definition of dominant high status? Because whilst we are clearly of a similar personality type, and as you touched on, we work in an industry where it's okay to be openly vulnerable or even confidently insecure. What about if there is a need to be dominant, whether it's in a place of work or a challenging family situation? How would you define dominant happy high status?
I think of dominant happy high status as something that not everybody is going to want to use or feel comfortable with. I don't think we all need to dominate a situation. I'd like everybody to find a way of standing up for themselves and saying what they have to say, but that's not going to look the same on everybody. For some people, that's going to be about listening for a long time and then right at the end of the conversation saying something insightful. For other people, it will be about dominating the conversation. So some of this is very subjective, and it's about finding what works for you. For people who do want to feel a bit more dominant, but not let it slide into something that feels fake and aggressive, although sometimes it's useful to be fake and aggressive, let's be honest. I call it mafia energy without the murdering. And I've watched I love watching mafia stuff like Casino and Goodfellas and all of those Scorsese films. Sopranos is great for this as well. You see a little bit of that energy in Succession. It's this very aggressive, dominant, almost violent energy that can really be half and half charisma and menace. And it's very seductive. And in these, movie and TV depictions, it often slides into crime and a violence. So I'm always thinking, but what would that energy look like on a woman who wants to use that energy for good? So to harness that feeling of charisma, and I know exactly where this conversation needs to go. I know how to make this work. Come with me. I mean, I would say Michelle Obama almost has that kind of mafia energy without the murdering. Like, be part of my tribe, be part of my community. I've got ideas. Let's go. There's something very, very inspiring about that. So I'm always trying to find examples where people are overly confident. So like if you're in the mafia, you are overly confident, right? You're so confident that you think you can kill people and nothing's going to happen. And in those movies we see, they turn out to be right. Nothing does happen. They just get more power and then they become more confident. So I love to think about what if you could actually have that confidence, but use it for something good and not use it to acquire more power and more immunity from immorality. What if you use it for good? And it's always fascinating to me as well that in those kind of depictions, often of power, and you would see it in things like Billions as well, any depictions of extreme power on TV, stage or screen, they're usually dominated by men. And it's always really interesting to me to see how women channel that. So, if people want to get inspiration or see what this looks like and experiment with this, then I would say look at House of Cards. There are lots of great women showing dominant, happy, high status there. Look at Game of Thrones. There's a lot of dominant women there. And they don't necessarily use their dominance for something that you would want to use it for in real life. But you can channel a flavour of that and take it with you into your next interaction with an obstreperous teenager who's telling you that they know best.
Into my house.
Well, it's also my house, so yeah.
It's interesting that you say Billions, because my favourite character in Billions is Wendy.
Right.
above and beyond all, I love Wendy. And what I love about Wendy is the two main characters, the two main male characters, are constantly at loggerheads, constantly kind of trying to destroy each other, and they never will. And in the center of it all is this calm, powerful woman who they both love and are both terrified of. And she speaks more quietly than anyone else in the show. She can do more with a raised eyebrow than anyone else in the show. And to me, I suppose, going by what you say, she's the epitome of dominant, happy, high status. She knows who she is, and she knows she actually controls all of it, and yet doesn't have to scream and shout and throw her weight around like she was in a Scorsese film or what have you. So yeah, if anyone watching or listening hasn't watched Billions, go and be more Wendy. Honestly, I love her. I love her.
Yeah.
But before we go, I want to ask you about the what if happy high status, because I think it's a really good one to end on, because particularly as women, we seem to paralyze ourselves with the whole fear of what if and what if it goes wrong. And I love the idea of embracing that and doing it anyway within your happy high status. Talk us through what that means.
Yeah, this idea of what if, it's really freeing yourself up to create a mental exercise where you think to yourself, well, what if the worst thing happens? What then? And you can even take moments where you make a list of, here are the 10 worst things that could happen if I go ahead with this plan, and see it in black and white. And often you'll see, actually, these things are extremely unlikely to happen. And in addition to that, you can think, oh, well, do you know what? If they did happen, I've got this friend I can call who would support me through that, or I could probably cope with that, So opening up what if and then moving to what I would call safe experimentation. So you find the safest way of the smallest step of trying something. So if you're thinking, you've just started some new business venture and you want to be more public on social media, but you feel, I don't want people to think that I'm, blowing my own trumpet all the time. Then you just allow yourself to think, well, what if I push it a little bit too far and post something that I feel is a bit too boastful? What if? And maybe pull it back a little bit. So don't do the most boastful thing that you can think of, but a semi-boastful one, and see what happens. Because you can always take it down. Or you can always then do another post saying, oh, I did this experiment and actually I didn't like it in the end. Like, you can always comment on your experiment. So finding some safe way of doing something that is risky, where you can then draw data from it. Because very often, I learnt this in comedy, your internal narrative of what has worked and what hasn't worked is quite flawed. Like, I might think I'd had a really good gig and I would listen to it back and actually it wasn't that good. Or I'd listen and I thought it was terrible and I'd listen back to the recording and actually it was pretty good. So actually doing things, thinking, what if I try this? Doing it, then asking yourself honestly, did this work? Did it achieve what I wanted? Could I try? Do I need to rein it back in a bit, or could I push it a bit further? Whatever that looks like in your world, that's the way to embrace that kind of energy. Instead of being fearful all the time and not doing anything unless it's the most perfect, guaranteed result. Because in real life, that doesn't exist.
How can you maintain happy high status for life?
Well, you can't. Even Michelle Obama has bad days. I'm sure Beyonce doesn't. So you need to get her on and ask her. She's a happy high status all of the time. But even she has shared she makes her music and her creativity out of her worst moments and her vulnerability. The key is to try to dig into the moments where you feel it naturally.
Well, unfortunately, as you can see by how my conversation with Viv ended, there was a technical issue that I didn't realise had happened until I played the recording back, and it cut off the end of our conversation, which is really, really frustrating. I think you'll agree that Viv was an amazing guest, and what I was rounding up with was how you can get in touch with her. I'm going to put all the details of her Instagram accounts and her website on this YouTube channel as well, so that you don't miss out on that, because you need to be able to follow Viv and her podcast, her Instagram account, and also her amazing books as well. I hope you enjoyed it.